So I'm going to introduce to you, and I'm very proud to be a friend of him. I've often said, having played 10 years in the NBA, this is the only doctor I know better than Dr. J. This is Dr. Wallach here. And Doc has meant so much to people all over the country and all over the world. He's a former athlete, and he grew up on a farm. So on a farm, he learned a lot about how you treat farm animals. He went to become a veterinarian. He also became a physician, a pathologist. He studied all around the world why animals and why humans die. He found a lot of revelations that were used in veterinarian medicine that he could also use on humans. This is very valuable knowledge that he gained, and he's been spreading this knowledge. He was nominated for a Nobel Prize for his work, Trace Minerals. So he has a wealth of information to share with us. It's very impactful, so please give your total attention, and you're going to learn a lot. To Dr. Joel Wallach. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you. Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate all those kind words, and really appreciate Theo being here and telling his story. He's such a wonderful young man. It's kind of like my kid graduating college. I'm so proud of him and his family, and of course Mike and Phil. We've been working together now for 11 years, and appreciate you coming here on a beautiful Saturday morning. And we're going to share some information with you. And you've all heard of that book, Purpose Driven Life. I was fortunate in finding out very early, I think, what my purpose was from God. And my purpose, I think, was to spread health information. So I spent most of my time doing that. And it became very clear very quickly that there's a lot of misinformation being given out by the health professions. And you'll see in this presentation that it kind of guided us in the wrong direction. Especially true in the black and Hispanic communities. And we came up with a thought. We called it the black gene lies. The black gene lies. Well, believe it or not, how many of you ever heard that African Americans, black people all over the world, have this terrible gene that makes you at a higher risk for high blood pressure and diabetes and cancer and other diseases? Well, I'm here to tell you it's a lie. Okay? Amen. It is a lie. And what I'm going to do in the next hour or so is show you how it is a lie and how we've eliminated these diseases in animals. It's very, very clear. We worked with tens of thousands of black people and Hispanics. I'm from California, and I'm a minority in California. There's 65% of the people in California Hispanic, so I've learned to be a minority too. At any rate, as Mike pointed out very nicely, I think the thing that makes my view different on health is that I'm a veterinarian as well as a physician. And in veterinary medicine, we don't have health insurance for animals like we do people. And if we were to use a human healthcare type of system for livestock, for instance, it'd be sticker shock for you. Your hamburger would cost you $275 a pound just to pay for the health care. So we learned a long time ago in the animal industry that we could keep the price of animal products such as meat and milk and dairy and poultry and eggs down where the average American could afford to eat it every day simply by eliminating health care costs in animals. Now I'm going to repeat that because it's such a profound statement. It's like the Bible. There's certain things worth repeating, right? We were able to do this by eliminating health care costs. And it always seemed odd to me as a veterinarian that we did that in animals. Nobody was transferring that information to people. And I spent about 20 years trying to, through the standard methods, writing scientific articles, writing textbooks, lecturing to doctors in groups this size, continuing education things for them. And I was an abysmal failure. I just failed terribly in getting medical doctors excited about preventing and curing diseases in people with nutrition like we had done in animals. We were so successful in animals, we actually had eliminated 900 different diseases that still plague people. We did this with simple little nutritional formulas, and you've all seen these little alfalfa pellets for mouse pellets and rat pellets and hamster pellets and gerbil pellets and guinea pig pellets and rabbit pellets and canned and dried dog and cat food. We have sheep pellets and horse pellets and pig pellets and calf pellets, and we have dairy pellets, and we have monkey pellets and parrot pellets and chicken pellets and trout pellets and llama pellets, and you get the idea. But the reason why we put the nutrition into the little animal pellets is so that the animal cannot sort through and just eat only the sunflower seeds and the raisins. Every mouthful is going to be biochemically perfect. And the purpose was to maximize production of eggs, maximize the production of meat, maximize the production of milk, maximize fertility, maximize longevity, eliminate diseases, because we didn't have health insurance for these animals. And we were so effective with this little system that we eliminated 900 different diseases that still plague people. Well, I knew this was my mission at that point because I really understood it, and I went back to school, became a physician. 1978, began to use these veterinary nutritional formulas in my human patients, and I'm here to tell you that the concept of preventing and curing diseases in people with nutritional formulas works exactly the same. Now, if you were to today ask your medical doctor or some expert in health, regardless of who they might be, college professors or high school biology teachers, doctors, nurses, they're all going to tell you that there's no evidence to support a claim that you can prevent and cure diseases with vitamins and minerals. And I know you've all heard that on TV, you've heard it on the radio, you've read it. That's absolutely a lie. And I'll give you some examples. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of scurvy. Raise your hand. Sure. And everybody knows you can prevent and cure scurvy with vitamin C, right? How about rickets? Anybody here ever hear of rickets? Yeah, you know you can prevent and cure rickets with vitamin D. What about anemia? Anybody ever hear of anemia? You know you can prevent and cure anemia with iron and copper and folic acid and B12 and many other nutrients. What about goiter? You know you can prevent and cure goiter with iodine and copper and selenium and amino acid tyrosine, many other nutrients. Night blindness you can prevent and cure with vitamin A. And then there's other ones like beriberi. How many have ever heard of beriberi? If you talk to medical experts, they'll say, well, yeah, that's only in third world countries. People who are very poor. You don't see beriberi in America because we're an industrialized nation. And with beriberi, you only find this in third world countries. Well, that's not true. There's an epidemic of beriberi in America right now, and it shows up as congestive heart failure. And the reason is Americans and humans all over the industrialized world get their thiamine or vitamin B1 from enriched flours. That's how most of us get vitamin B1 or thiamine, is from enriched flours. Now, how many of you have ever heard of a low-carbohydrate diet? Now, when you give up bread and muffins and pastas, guess what you're giving up? Vitamin B1. So a lot of people who get on these low-carbohydrate diets wind up with congestive heart failure and other symptoms of beriberi because they're vitamin B1 deficient, because they're not supplementing when they get on that low-carbohydrate diet. So these are the sort of things we're going to talk about. It gets very exciting for me, so I hope you'll be as excited or half as excited as I am. I'm going to start out with just the front cover of the September 2000 issue of Scientific American. Almost the entire issue is devoted to human aging and 100-year-olds. And there were articles in there written by endocrinologists, geneticists, gerontologists, nurses, dietitians, nutritionists, and they all had their own agendas. So they had a summary at the end of this issue telling you what you were supposed to learn about nutrition and longevity and genetics. And they were editorially scratching their head because they found out when they kind of looked at this seriously that people who lived to be 100 in a healthful way were mean, feisty, rebellious patients who did not listen to their doctors. And you all have uncles and grandparents and parents who are in their 80s and 90s. They're eating eggs and cooking in lard and all this stuff and smoking the cigarettes and not exercising. They're 98 years old. And you had a cousin who went to medical school and he was jogging and doing everything right and eating salads and tofu, and he died at 52. And so the ones who did everything wrong, used salt, ate red meat, ate their chicken skin, used butter instead of margarine, these guys and gals did okay. And the ones who followed the doctor's instructions didn't make it. Well, you don't need to do a big survey. You just have to understand that doctors are given a lot of misinformation. Now, whether or not everybody in your family died at 35 or not doesn't matter. Everybody in this room has the genetic capability to live to be at least 100. If you believe in the Bible, which I hope you all do, and I believe you all do because you're here this morning, in Genesis it says at least 120, right? And a lot of the Old Testament prophets lived to be 900 years of age. So we know we have the genetics to get there. And the short version of why we all don't live to be 100 is not because we can't. It's because we do too much of the bad stuff and not enough of the good stuff. That's just the way with the physical body as well as it is with the spiritual body, right? Now, how many of you have ever made a dish from a recipe? I don't care if it's just those Pillsbury biscuits. You have to hit the thing on the counter, you know. Sure, we've all made oatmeal cookies and things like that. And when you look at a cookbook or a recipe collection, they always show these beautiful pictures of what your dish is supposed to look like if you follow the recipe. I don't know if mine ever turn out like that, but if you want to make a fruit cake, if you follow these instructions, yours is supposed to look like that. And if you want to make a pork loin roast stuffed with cranberries, it's supposed to look like that if you follow the instructions. Well, the same thing is true with healthcare. We know what a 25 and a 50 and a 75 and a 100-year-old human looks like because we've been using the same recipe. We've been using the same healthcare systems in the industrialized nations around the world for at least the last 150 or 200 years. 50 years ago, 75 and 100 years ago, they used different antibiotics, but they're still conceptually antibiotics. 25, 50, 75, or 100 years ago, 150 years ago, we used different painkillers, but there were still painkillers, conceptually the same thing. So little has changed. If you follow the standard recipe, if you will, for the medical and health system we have today, this is what you can fully expect to get. This is what you can fully expect to look like at age 80. Yeehaw! I mean, I praise God. Thank you, sir. I'm going to look like that when I'm 80. I hope you don't, okay, because this is not what we're all supposed to look like. This poor gentleman has Alzheimer's disease, cataracts, macular degeneration. He's had cochlear implants put in because he was deaf, no teeth because he had periodontal disease, which is nothing more than osteoporosis of the face and the jaw. He had his thyroid killed through radiation and then surgery. He had angiograms, angioplasties, stents put in, quadruple bypass, and then they did a heart transplant. He had his gallbladder taken out. He had his stomach stapled, bypassed, and banded. He had a kidney removed. He was on dialysis. Had his prostate removed. Had his hips replaced, his knees replaced, his shoulders replaced. His feet were amputated because he had diabetes. He's on 27 drugs for thyroid, pain, lowering cholesterol, and blood pressure. Now, if you follow the standard medical path, this is what you're looking at. Everybody gets there, right? Well, I'm going to show you a different recipe. Praise God. When I started talking to my human patients about that, they started looking kind of worried, and they said, "Doc, I don't want to go there. I don't want to wind up in a nursing home and be abused. You know, if I don't want to brush my teeth in the morning, I don't want to brush my teeth in the morning. I don't want them beating me up because I don't brush my teeth, and I don't want them sucking $5,000 a month out of my assets, which should go to my kids and my grandkids. So I don't know if it's worth living to be 100." And I thought those were legitimate concerns. So I began to collect birthday announcements that people were 100 and obituaries of people who made it to 100, just to see if it was worth going there. Is it really, really worth going there? And I'll show you a few of my favorites. So this fellow here, Ralph Charles from Somerset, Ohio, is in the middle of the state of Ohio, October 1999, turned 100, and they had a beautiful birthday story about him when he turned 100. And to me, the fascinating thing about Ralph Charles was he was still piloting commercial charter flights at age 100. Had no restrictions on his pilot's license or his health papers at age 100. Now, to me, he doesn't look like what the recipe should look like for a 100-year-old. To me, he looks like he's in his late 70s, early 80s, and he's still animated. Obviously, he does his own navigation, own plane maintenance, so he's still got some stuff upstairs, and so there's hope for us all. This fellow here, Harold Stilson from Deerfield Beach, Florida, in May of 2001, turned 101. He went out and played golf for his birthday, and he hit his 6th hole in one at 101. You have to have good enough vision to see that stick holding up the flag at 108 yards. You have to have a good grip on the club, and you have to have good enough eye-hand coordination to hit that little banty chicken egg-sized ball into a teacup-sized hole 108 yards away. And you know he doesn't have Alzheimer's disease because he's animated, and he is, in fact, color-coordinated. I thought this was a good Christian story, so I'm throwing this one in. This came out just May 31st of this year. This couple celebrated their 80th year of wedded bliss. They were married 80 years. He turned 105 and she turned 100. And the interviewers asked them what they thought, and his name is Percy and hers is Florence Arrowsmith from Hereford, England. They asked him what their secret was, and she said she drank a glass of red wine every morning and that she took a shot of whiskey before bed. And he said his success, 80-year married and being healthy for 105 years, came down to 2 words. And they said, "What are those 2 words?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am." Now here's 2 fellas that made it beyond 100. This is back in March of 1999. Herbert Young, 112 on your left, and Robert Thomas on your right, 103 years of age. And they had won some medals. France's Legion of Honor, which is kind of like their Medal of Honor like we have here in the First World War, and they were invited to go to France and pick up medals and things and drink a little bit of French wine. It looks like they're having a good time. They're from New York City. It doesn't seem to matter what you eat if you do 2 things to live to be beyond 100. There's a common thread, and I'm going to give you the short version now and the long version in a minute. The short version is you have to keep the amount of carbohydrates in your life down, and I'll show that to you in a second, and you need to keep the mineral levels in your life up. Now, one of the blessings I've had in my life, I spent 2 years out in the bush in South Africa working on big conservation projects. And I lived in the bush for that whole 2 years with the exception of 3 days in the city. The rest of the time I lived out in the bush. And so I know how primitive villages exist and live. This gal here, Dora Ramathebe from South Africa, was born in June of 1881. In 1995, she turned 114. And this was a birthday announcement. This isn't an obituary. This is a birthday announcement. And she was asked, what did she attribute her long and healthy life to? And she said she observed the biblical tenet of honor thy father and thy mother. And I thought that was really, really quite good. I really appreciated that. Of course, when I grew up, my first chores, we grew up on a little beef farm, and I was so excited when I first started working with the animals, and I'd do what my dad told me, and I'd come up to my dad and say, "Okay, what's my reward?" I did exactly as you told me. He says, "Son, I'll let you live another day." And so I knew it was important. what is it? Honor thy mother and thy father. I thought that was good. Okay, and then she said she ate locusts, as grasshoppers, not the trees. She ate grasshoppers, pumpkin seeds, tortoise meat, wild herbs, dried fruit, and a cup of coffee. That was her diet. And you notice there's no bread, no rice, no potatoes, no corn, no hush puppies. She got her protein from the grasshoppers and the tortoise meat. She got her essential fatty acids from the pumpkin seeds. She got her folic acid, beta-carotene, which is kind of a pre-vitamin A, and vitamin C from the wild herbs that she ate green before they dried, and then a little bit of phytonutrients and antioxidants from the dried fruit. So she had a low-carbohydrate diet that was rich in phytonutrients. But where did she get her minerals? How did she get those minerals up? Did she supplement? And the answer is yes. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But in her case, out in the bush in South Africa, just as when I grew up, my first chore when I was 4 years old, before they let me work with the livestock, I had to do something every day. How many of you grew up in a rural situation where you had wood as a fuel for heating or cooking? Anybody yet here? Okay, good. What did you do with the wood ashes every morning? Came out of the stove. Went in the garden, didn't they? Went in the garden. Well, wood ashes aren't just ashes. Wood ashes are plant minerals. Wood ashes are plant minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the wood. And so we put those plant minerals in the garden. The onions and radishes and peas and beans and tomatoes and squash and okra all took those plant minerals up. We ate the vegetables, and we got our minerals indirectly that way. They would also mix the plant ashes, the plant minerals, in with their food because they didn't have baking powder, and they lived inland, and salt was a very expensive thing. So instead of using salt, they would mix the plant ashes into their food. So they had two ways that they actually took in minerals. And I thought that was very exciting to see them do exactly what I had done as a kid. Now this is from the Herald Sun, which is the Sydney, Australia newspaper back in March of 2003. And Sydney, Australia, and Australia is located kind of like where Atlanta is in the United States, in that southeastern quadrant. It says here, a Brazilian believed to be the world's oldest woman has died at the age of 124. Maria Etilovina dos Santos died of a stroke in Salvador, and her birth certificate says she was a descendant of African slaves, and she was born July 15th, 1878. So you know you have the genetics to live well beyond 100, because the Bible tells you so, and people every once in a while do it, right? And so we need to know what it is they're doing. I thought this was kind of important. She enjoyed a long, healthy life, and I guarantee you, if she was born of African slaves, that she was born in a little straw hut caulked with cow manure and mud, and her mama had to pee in the dust to make mud to smear all over that child to keep the fleas and the mosquitoes and the flies from eating her, because they didn't have screen windows, they didn't have hospitals and clinics, and they didn't have doctors as we know them today. They didn't have Social Security, they didn't have Medicare and Medicaid, and yet she did pretty good, set a record, 124, with all those things that are missing that we think are important. Here's another gal with an African heritage. This lady here, Elizabeth Israel, from a little Caribbean island of Dominica, was born January 27, 1875, and in January 2001 turned 126. And when she was asked, what does she attribute her healthy, long life to? She says, I grew up eating food grown without chemical fertilizer. What did her parents use as fertilizer? Wood ashes, which are the plant minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the wood. I'm going to show you one more, and then I'll kind of tell you what I think you should learn from these, and we'll get into the meat of this presentation. This next obituary is not the oldest one that I have. This is kind of middle-aged compared to some of the obituaries I have, which are up in the 200s. But this gal here, an Iranian woman, died in January of 1995. This is written up in the Rocky Mountain News out of Denver, Colorado. And she's an Iranian woman by the name of Mazumi Dosti, and said that she died at age 161. It was printed in the Denver newspaper, Rocky Mountain News. And you have to give a lot of credibility to this obituary because she was survived by 6 living children ranging in age from 120 to 128. They hadn't even left home to go to college yet. And her oldest son said his mother had never visited a doctor, taken any chemical medications, all she uses herbs in her life. What you're going to find, fellas, is that the people who live the longest are the ones who are furthest from what we consider to be necessary and good medical care. The people who live the longest are the ones who are furthest from what we think of as necessary and good medical care, and you'll see why in just a second. The first statistic we have to look at is the United States, we in America, spend more than half the entire world's annual expenditure for health care. The entire world right now is spending $2.7 trillion with a T dollars every year for health care. And out of that $2.7 trillion, America alone spends $1.8 trillion. We spend 5 times as much for our health care as we do for our defense. $1.8 trillion for health care. Now, if we were number one, you'd have to say, well, that's expensive, but go for it because it's worth it. We're number one, right? Let's have a look. In April of 1990, the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control right out of Atlanta here did a study on the top 32 industrialized nations, and they were shocked to find out when it came to life expectancy or longevity and health, the United States ranked 17th. There were 16 other countries in April of 1990 whose peoples were healthier and lived longer than us. The Japanese came in number one at 79.1. We came at 17th at 75. And the Japanese, according to Western doctors, do everything wrong. They're heavy smokers. And I don't smoke, and I'm not promoting smoke. I'm just giving the statistics. They're heavy smokers. 68% of the Japanese smoke 3 to 5 packs of cigarettes a day. Yet they have 85% less cancer than we do, and they have 85% less cardiovascular disease than we do. The Japanese are heavy salt users. They consume 12 to 15 grams of salt a day, which is 2 heaping tablespoons of salt. We're supposed to consume less than 1 gram of salt a day, yet they have 85% less cardiovascular disease than we do. And they do not have a spoken word for hypertension because they rarely get it, unless they come to the United States and eat like us. I'm going to throw in one more little variant here. The French came in 11th at 75.9. And you can say, well, that was a bad study. Let's redo it. And they did. 10 years later, June 2000, they came out with another study. Again, it was the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control out of Atlanta, Georgia. They did a good job. And, of course, the interesting thing was Japan remained number one, but they dropped from 79.1 down to 74.5. Huge drop, and yet they remain number one. But this is our chance to catch up with them and surpass them. Remember, we're spending $1.8 trillion a year for health care. We're spending about 63% of the world's annual expenditure for health care. And the French moved up from 11th to 3rd. They went from 75.9 down to 73.1, but they moved up in ranking. And this is called the French paradox because the French consume more fat than any other culture on earth. Can you imagine a French chef cooking in canola oil and margarine? They cook everything in butter and lard and chicken fat and cream, right? And yet they moved up in ranking. They dropped in actual numbers, but they did move up in ranking. So this is called the French paradox. You will not find the United States in the top 20 because June of 2000 we had dropped to 24th because we went from 75 average lifespan to 70. Now, in June of 2000, the actual was that there were 23 other countries whose peoples live longer than us. The newest update, and this is from a special health issue of Newsweek, it's a special edition, The Future of Medicine. They're talking about genetics and the usual stuff that medicine talks about, new drugs, new procedures. And in the very first article in this Newsweek magazine, the very first article, it said, America has built the world's highest tech medical system. I don't think anybody could argue with that, because every country sends their brightest young medical students to the United States for their residencies and internships and so forth. Yet the nation now ranks 46th in life expectancy. Now there's 45 other countries whose peoples live longer than us. Do you feel that we're getting the bang for the buck when it comes for health care? No. No. We would not tolerate this in any other industry, and nobody knows more than the black community how to change an industry. If you have a failed and corrupt system, you don't use it. If you have a failed and corrupt system, you don't use it. You don't ask for more money to fix it. This is a very interesting statistic. Phil Oliver got this for me. This is per 100,000 white people and per 100,000 black people. Per 100,000 each year in America, 1,037 and 8 die per 100,000 black males, 593 black females. By contrast, about two-thirds of that number, only two-thirds of white males will die, 664 compared to 1,037. And with females, white females, only 384 die compared to 593. That's per 100,000 population. Okay, so we have a lot of work to go here. And then you look at the mortality for kids, neonatal, that means newborns, 12 per 100,000 of male blacks, 10 per 100,000 of female blacks, newborn babies, half for the white male and female. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's doable because it's not genetic. Now, some of the things we need to change are fun, and you will do it. You will start today when I show it to you, because it's easy, it's fun, and it'll make you live longer. The first one I'm going to share with you is this one. It says, frequent sex helps you live longer. Yes! God gave you the equipment to use, right? Praise God. Okay, now this was give me an order. This was published in the British Medical Journal back in December of 1997, and basically, to make the short version of it, they said men who had sex twice a week actually live 50% longer than men who only have sex once a month. Now, what if you have sex 3 times a week? You know. And so you need to make some kind of contract with your wives. Wives. Wife. Okay, I'm in the right group here. Okay. Now you got to watch it, because once they know this, if they want to get rid of you, they know how to do it. Also, the same year, December 1997, this was a wonderful study. It was done by Harvard Medical School, the Department of Public Health. And what they did was look at the longevity of both men and women. And the reason why it's all these funny little boxes and different shaped boxes, they went county by county. Now, this is one of the more difficult things you're going to have to do to live to be 100 in a healthful way. This is called the heart attack and stroke belt of America, both for men and women. The people who live the longest in America, you'll see them in blue, purple, and dark purple. As the upper Midwest here, you're looking at Wisconsin, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, eastern Montana, northern Iowa, eastern Nebraska, and Kansas. These are the longest lived people in America. The shortest lived people in America live here. Guess where Atlanta is? In fact, the lifespan here in Atlanta is 20 years shorter than the people who live in the upper Midwest. Your average lifespan here is 20 years shorter, than it is in the upper Midwest. It's not genetic, but it is cultural. The reason why this is the heart attack and stroke belt and cancer belt of America is not because of genetics, it's because of the way people eat. The difference is people in the upper Midwest come from Scandinavian and German backgrounds, and they stew and roast and boil everything. How do people eat here? Fried chicken. And I talked briefly with Pastor Dollar, and he says, how are you going to get a black man to give up fried chicken? So this is going to be a tough one. But if you do this one thing today, you will add 20 to 50 healthy years to your life. If you take this home and do nothing else but this, you got to give up fried fish and fried chicken. You got to give up fried hush puppies. You got to give up fried potatoes. You got to give up fried okra. You got to give up fried chitlins. Everything fried. You got to give up fried stuff. And if you do that, that alone will add 20 to 50 healthful years to your life. And the reason is fried foods contain free radicals, trans fatty acids, that increase your risk of cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's disease 1,000%. Whereas if you boil and stew and roast your food, you don't get those free radicals. And so this is a suicide area if you keep eating fried foods. That just comes down to the bottom line. If we can get our community in the southeastern part of the United States, and if we do that and we kind of spread that amongst our loved ones, we're going to add long, healthful years to their life. Now, how many of you remember a guy by the name of Art Linkletter? Anybody remember Art Linkletter? Okay, good. Some of us are old enough to remember him. He's 92 years old now and still alive. He aspired to want to live to be 100, and he was willing to be proactive and do it. And he was inspired to want to live to be 200 by a group of people called the Hunzas, who live in what is today known as eastern Pakistan. All this war is going on there now. But back in the 1920s and 1930s, they were the longest lived and healthiest people on earth. A novel was written about them. It was a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel called Lost Horizon, written by James Hilton. Art Linkletter read this novel, and he was excited about it because essentially what the book said was there was this place in this very hostile mountain where it was kind of like a branch office of the Garden of Eden. Everything was perfect, and if you lived in that place and ate their food and did what they do and so forth, you could live to be 200-300 years of age. Well, there is a place called Hunza, and Art Linkletter hired an eye doctor by the name of Alan Bannock to go there and find out what their secret was. And to make the long story short, they farmed at 19,500 feet elevation, which is like 3 times timberline. They could not grow potatoes, they could not grow corn, they could not grow rice because of the elevation. Very short growing season, only 45 days. So they didn't have the traditional carbohydrate sources that most everybody else has. And without even thinking about it, because where they lived, they had a very low carbohydrate diet. They lived on mutton, which is adult sheep, and they had lamb and goat meat, and they had chicken and eggs and butter and yogurt, and they cooked in butter and water. That's all they had. They were very poor. They couldn't trade even for oils and things, so they only used butter and water to cook with. They had a very low carbohydrate, high animal protein diet. Now, the other thing they did that he noted in this book is very clearly stated in this book, that he observed that they took the wood ashes, the plant minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the wood, and put them in their garden and mixed it in their food. So they had the high mineral intake, and they had the low carbohydrate intake, and that apparently was their secret. This is a beautiful story here I picked up in Houston, Texas about a year ago. It was a story about a primitive guy by the name of Bruno Opaza, one of Bolivia's indigenous Aymara Indians. He's holding a little bucket of llama manure, dried llama manure, which he's feeding his kitchen fire with. You notice that's a little 1 foot by 2 foot cast iron stove. And the interesting thing about the Aymara Indians is that they live around a lake called Lake Titicaca, and he's from Bolivia, and there's people from Peru and people from Chile that live right around Lake Titicaca. And all those people that live around Lake Titicaca are very primitive, like Bruno Opaza. No indoor plumbing, no electricity. They have no hospitals, no clinics, no Medicaid, no Medicare. They have no pharmacies, no pharmaceuticals, nothing that we think of as being absolutely essential, and yet they have 100-year-old per 500 people. We have 300-year-olds per 10,000. They have 10 times as many 100-year-olds as we have. They have 10 times as many 100-year-olds as we have. And they have nothing except raw materials. They're putting those raw materials in their food every day, those plant minerals in their food every day. We need raw materials. And people ask me, well, what did people do in the old days? Did Jesus supplement with minerals? And the answer was yes. In our book we call Hell's Kitchen, we have a CD to go along with it, Hell's Kitchen. This CD, Hell's Kitchen, the book Hell's Kitchen, talks about how long ago the people used wood ashes or plant minerals in their food and their gardens. And it goes back before written history. We know this from the anthropological and the archaeological records that people before written history would do this. Even Moses, I'm sure, he did not take the wood ashes out into the garden because he was raised as a prince of Egypt, right? But I'm sure they had their slaves do that. And then there was Jesus. He was raised as a little Jewish boy, so I guarantee you that he took the wood ashes outside like all the other little Jewish boys did and put them in the garden. And this remained the same from before written history until Monday, September 4th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 1882. I'll repeat that date, very important. We know the exact instant, Monday, September 4th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 1882, when this man changed everything. Anybody know who he is? That's Thomas Edison. And at that moment, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, his chief electrical technician, a guy by the name of Jonathan Leaves, in New York City on Pearl Street, overlooking the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, gives you a little time sense, turned on the switch for the first commercial electric generating plant. By 1909, there was at least a half a dozen patented electrical kitchen appliances, including toasters and skillets and waffle irons and blenders and irons and things like that. And by 1950, wood as a fuel had been completely replaced with natural gas, propane, electricity, liquid paraffin, kerosene, heating oils. How many wood ashes are left over when you use those fuels? I'll give you a hint. It's a numeral that looks like this and begins with a zero. Zero. Okay? And so nobody sat down. There were no Senate investigation. What's going to be the impact on our health when we stop using wood as a fuel? Nobody asked that question. They were just glad to get rid of that chore. They sold all these other stoves and appliances by saying you didn't have to wake up 2 hours early to build the fire and get the fire right for bacon biscuits for breakfast. So most of the diseases we're going to talk about fall into mineral deficiency diseases as a result of that one invention, electricity. We're not going to be able to talk our wives into going back to wood stoves. They'll chase you out of the house with a broom, right? But we do have to make up the difference. We have to consciously supplement, otherwise we're going to break down. We need 90 essential nutrients. They're called essential nutrients, gentlemen, because we cannot manufacture them. We must consume them every day, either as food or as supplements. Number two, if they're missing for any length of time, days, weeks, months, or years, you get some horrible collection of degenerative diseases, many of which are disabling, many of which are life-threatening. We need 60 minerals every day, not once a year, but every day. We need 16 vitamins every day, 12 essential amino acids every day, 3 essential fatty acids every day. And fortunately for us, our food plants, our grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts can take carbon dioxide out of the air, use the sun's energy in a process known as photosynthesis to manufacture long carbon chains. And the plant will take these carbon chains and configure them into starch, which is potatoes and grains. It'll configure them into sugar, which is fruit and sugar cane, vitamins, amino acids, and fatty acids. And it is possible with the grace of God and a lot of effort on our part to get all the vitamins, amino acids, and fatty acids we need by eating right and selecting the right food and preparing it right and storing it right. But most people don't take the 3 hours a day that would require. Everybody runs in, buys a box of this, throws it in the stove, cooks it and eats it, and we're all eating out of boxes and things. And even if we're eating fresh foods, it's very difficult, as you'll see in a minute, to get everything we need. Now the problem is, plants can in fact make vitamins, amino acids, fatty acids, but plants cannot manufacture minerals. You notice that 2/3 of the essential nutrients are minerals. We need 60 minerals to be happy. A plant only needs 9. I have a degree in agriculture, so I can assure you that plants only need 9 to be fertile and happy and do their thing. But if a farmer were to put in 9 minerals in every crop, it'd cost you $35 an ear for a ear of corn. And so he's not going to do it. He couldn't sell any. And so they learned 150 years ago that they could put in 3 elements into the soil, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, a very cheap, very simple fertilizer. You see these 3-letter designations on garden fertilizers and lawn fertilizers, NPK, and different configurations depending on the plant. It will give them the maximum yields in terms of tons and bushels per acre. So that's what they use, NPK. And that's why they use these little alfalfa pellets with all the vitamins and minerals in it to give their animals. Because they know, the farmers know, and the veterinarians know, that you can't get everything you need from your food. Even in the same field on the farmer's property, you you cannot get everything you need because row number 1 might have 16 minerals in it, row number 5 might have 0, row number 10 might have 3, row number 15 might have 6, row number 20 might have 0, and so it's a throw of the dice when you wake up in the morning and you eat some whole grain pancakes or 11 grain bread made into toast, or you have your whole grain cereals. It's a throw of the dice in which row in the field that grain grew in. And are you going to bet your life every morning when you wake up? I mean, would you play the game that if you threw dice and you got a 7 in any combination, 2 and a 5, 4 and a 3, 1 and a 6, any combination you get a 7, you'd get to live another day. But if you got any other number, you would die, and I got your clothes and your shoes and your car and everything. How many of you would voluntarily play that game? Nobody. You'd have to be insane to play that game. Well, if you're not supplementing every morning to guarantee those 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, and 3 essential fatty acids, that's the game you're playing. That exactly is the game you're playing. This is kind of a soft business magazine. I'm sure many of you have seen it. U.S. News and World Report. This is the January-February issue of 2005. It says a special health issue. Who needs doctors? Your future physician might not be an MD, and you may be better off. They're talking about nurse practitioners, they're talking about chiropractors, naturopathic doctors, traditional Chinese medical doctors, herbalists, acupuncturists, and so forth. And just a few things you got to watch on doctors. They're human beings, and they fail like most human beings or groups of human beings. Doctors say they'd lie to get insurers to pay. This is a big study. It was published by the Journal of the American Medical Association back in 1999. Study finds doctors skip key steps to treatments. Doctors fail to take about half the recommended steps for treating high blood pressure and diabetes, 2 diseases that are very important in the black community. I'll give you a couple more statistics here, and then we'll get into some specific diseases. But I think these are very, very useful, and I'll tell you how to solve these problems. This came out November 1996. This was a study by Harvard Medical School and the Department of Public Health examining the casualty count. Now, those are military terms, casualty count. They don't use casualty count in the hospital. Look that up in the dictionary. That's military terms for killed and wounded, right? Casualties. The annual toll of medical harm, that's each year in hospitals alone in America, 1.3 million physical injuries by doctors' negligence, 180,000 deaths each year in hospitals. 3 years later, this came out, this is November 1999, medical mistakes are the 8th top killer of Americans, behind cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, gastrointestinal problems, liver problems, kidney problems, and doctors. Now, you got to give them credit. They did improve. By December 2002, they went from the 8th leading cause of death in America to the number 3 leading cause of death in America because they moved up to killing 250,000 Americans each year in hospitals. This is published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The study was done by Johns Hopkins School of Public Health at the Department of Medical School. Right out of Atlanta, Georgia, 7.5 years ago, 2 million Americans are infected each year in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence, 2 million. And despite intravenous antibiotics, round-the-clock nursing care, 90,000, and this year is 103,000 died out of these 2 million, year after year after year. One more statistic, and then I'll tell you what I think we should do about it. Every day in America, there's 40 drug errors in each hospital in America. It turns out to be 2.2 million drug errors a year, 2.2 million drug errors, of which 140,000 die. Now, if you've been good with math, you've been keeping track of these numbers, that turns out to be 5.8 million casualties a year, killed, injured, and infected in the hospitals in America each year. 5.8 million casualties. A hospital is not a safe place. I don't know how else to say it. You should not aspire to take a day off so you can go to the hospital. I'm going to take a sick day and I'll just run to the hospital. You know. You want to be careful there, fellas. It's a very dangerous place. How do we solve this problem? More money? Well, we're already spending more money than all the other nations in the world put together, and we rank now 46th in longevity and health. No, so it's not more money. More technology. We already have 250,000 drugs. And with the exception of antibiotics, which do kill bacterial infections, strep throat and gangrene and things like that, with the exception of these antibiotics, which are about 500 of them in the PDR, you take them out, that leaves 249,500 drugs left in the PDR that a doctor has available to treat diseases. There's not a single one of those designed to cure anything. They're all designed to make you feel good, but they're not designed. There's not a single other drug other than antibiotics designed to cure anything. If doctors were to cure all the diseases, which they could in a couple of days, they'd be out of work. And so how do we solve the problem? We have to do things ourselves. How many of you have ever put in fuel in a car or a truck? Anybody ever put fuel in a car or truck? Good. How many of you ever changed a tire in a car or truck? Excellent. How many of you have ever washed a car or truck? Huh? Yeah. Okay. How many of you have ever vacuumed the inside of a car or truck? How many of you have ever added oil to a car or truck? Okay, good. How many of you have ever kind of done that little touch-up, you know, when you scratch your car, those little touch-up paint things? Sure. How many of you have ever heard of AutoZone, Pep Boys, Napa Auto Parts, Schutz, Checkers. I mean, everybody knows where their local store is, right? You go down there and you get spark plugs and you gap those things. You do all that stuff yourself. Get the right paint color and the mats for the floor and so on. And other more complicated parts for the car and stereos and all that kind of thing. We do this because of a variety of reasons. Number one, people got tired of being ripped off by the dealerships. You go in to get your oil changed for $8 and you come out with a $300 bill and it leaks all over your driveway because they didn't tighten those bolts, right? And so you can save all that labor cost and do it yourself for $12. It's at $80 or $300, right? And so people began to do these things themselves. Same thing is true with Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards. How many of you have heard of them? Yeah, we all live in those places because we learned we can get materials and parts and tools cheaper. And if you don't know how to put shingles on a roof, they'll give you a free class. They'll even put those bundles of shingles on your roof for you at no extra cost if you buy the nails and the shingles from them. How come we don't do that for health care? Well, it's complicated. You need to go to school for 14 years. You need to know how to read Latin. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. Doctors, other than a lot of fancy furniture, they have less than $100 worth of stuff in their examining room. They got a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope, they got a thermometer, they've got a little AAA battery pen light to look in your eyes and down your throat with, and you snatch that out of their pocket and look at it, it says Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. They didn't pay for that. It was given to them by a drug dealer. So you can get all those things from the pharmacy without a prescription, and you'll notice that it costs you about $65 for all that stuff total together. And if you don't know how to use them, there's a little insert in the box they come in, written in the 5th grade reading level in 8 different languages, including Spanish. You can do this. It's very simple to do that. You should learn how to take your own blood pressure. You should learn how to check your own temperature and all that kind of stuff. You know, Grandma used to do that, but we don't. You kind of feel hot, you run to the doctor now. We need to do more of that stuff ourselves. With the exception of radiology, with the exception of things like CAT scans and MRIs and X-rays and ultrasounds, you can get any test from the pharmacy without a prescription that a doctor would send you to a hospital for. I know it shocks most people. For about $1.50 a test strip, and they come 10 in a bottle, it's $15 a bottle. You can get these test strips that you just pee on, and you can tell if you have sugar in your urine, you can tell if you have blood in your urine, if you have protein in your urine, or if you have infection in your kidneys or your bladder. For $1.50. It saves you $18.50 on the co-payment, plus it saves you the gas money and the parking and getting all dressed up and your extra shaving lotion, all that kind of stuff. It saves all that stuff. So you save about $40 by doing that yourself. You also get a test strip to find out what your blood sugar is. You're empowered to test your own blood sugar when you have diabetes. You can test what your blood cholesterol is yourself. You get what's called an occult blood test. It's blood in your bowel movement. You can't see with the naked eye, but this is an early warning signal of colon cancer, maybe ulcerative colitis, gastric ulcers, blood-sucking parasites, all those kind of things. For a couple of bucks, $2, $3, you can get those test strips, and you can do that yourself. You don't have to go in once a year to get a 3-foot galvanized pipe put up your rump for them to look in there, right? You don't have to do that. You can do that little test yourself for $3 in the privacy of your home, a little brown bag. Nobody needs to know you're doing it. And then there's all these tests to see if women are premenopausal, postmenopausal, menopausal. There's tests to see if they're pregnant. $7.95. EPT test in any drugstore. Why do they have to go in 2 visits and all these tests and physical exams for $500 by an OBGYN to find out if they're pregnant? You can do it in your own home in 30 seconds for $7.95. What about dental work? I love this one. Usually when your filling is going to fall out or your crown is going to come off, it's right in the middle of the day on Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving, right? And New Year, something like that. And so you call the dentist, and it's $1,300 for a temporary, and then 2 weeks later you got to go back in and get the permanent one put in for another $1,300. You can go to a pharmacy or even a grocery store where they sell dental floss, and right next to the dental floss is a little bubble wrap package of a temporary filling. It costs you $5, has all the instructions, all the little tools and disinfectants and things you need to put them in, and they will last 10 years. Now, even if it only falls out every 10 years, you can afford that, right? And keep doing it yourself. Do you need stitches every time you cut yourself? And the answer is no. It's not shooting blood all over the place. If you can take a towel or washcloth and you can stop it bleeding just kind of a half a pound of pressure, you can wash that thing out with a disinfectant and put some colloidal silver in there, antibacterial soap. You can use steri strips and butterfly bandages. You're going to save hours and hours and hours sitting in the emergency room, being abused in the emergency room, people coughing all over you and all that kind of stuff. And so the more of this kind of thing we do ourselves and avoid a failed and corrupt system when you can, guess what? Price is going to come down. That's called the free market system because they want to attract you back in. How many of you are buying your own home? How many of you are buying your own home? Great. Great asset. One of the best things you can do is somehow get to buy your own home. And here's why. Most people, when they buy health insurance for a family of 5, It costs you $300, $500, $800 a month, depending on if anybody's been sick in the family. Let's just say, for round figures, $500 a month for health insurance, $50 deductible, $100 deductible. If you get a $2,000 line of credit or a $5,000 line of credit on your home, stick that certificate in your lockbox and don't buy a snowmobile with it. Don't do anything with it. Just put it in there. There's no interest on it. You'll have it as long as you own your house. You don't have to make payments. When you do make payments, it's stuck back in the mortgage so that you're going to take 30 years to pay that $5,000 off, right? So you're looking at $20 a month, very, very low. Then you go to your health insurance guy and you say, I want a $5,000 deductible health insurance policy. You know how much your monthly premium is going to be? Your monthly premium is going to be $100 at $5,000 deductible. You can use that extra $400 or $500 every month for your family. Instead of being insurance poor. How many of you heard the term insurance poor? Okay, it was worth your coming here today if you're buying your own home to get those lines of credit, get your insurance premiums down so you can invest in your family instead of the insurance company. Anybody know who this fella is? Einstein. Well, he died at age 76 of something a turkey wouldn't even die from, even though he won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. He died of a ruptured aortic aneurysm, which is caused by a copper deficiency, and one of the early signs of a copper deficiency is white hair. Another early sign of copper deficiency is a breakdown of the elastic fibers of your body. You can see all these wrinkles in the skin. He's got the elastic fibers in the skin broken down. You can get spider veins, varicose veins, hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids are nothing more than varicose veins in the wrong place. I practiced for 12 years up in Portland, Oregon. I could always tell when a new patient had hemorrhoids because they would always whisper. I don't know what the connection is, but they would always whisper when they come in. They'd say things like, Doc Wallach, my hemorrhoids are acting up. I need you to look at them. And I said, well, I'll take your word for it, Ralph. Once you've seen one hemorrhoid, you've seen them all, You get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in your arteries, you get a balloon or a bubble in the weakest area called an aneurysm. If you have a small one rupture in your brain, you get a bleeding type of stroke. If you have a larger one rupture in your brain, you die suddenly. If you have a small one rupture in your eye, you get a detached retina. And they have this wonderful technology now where they can take lasers without even opening up your eye. They can spot weld that retina back down and repair your vision. I mean, that is a miracle surgery, right? But does it solve the systemic copper deficiency? No. And unless the doctor urges you to get on some nutrients, a program that has copper in it, guess what? You're still going to die of a ruptured aneurysm 2 years later because you didn't heed that warning. You didn't heed that warning. Again, these books back there have all these warnings. There's over 500 early warning signals of these diseases that plague us as human beings. And once you know what they are, you can adjust your diet, you can add a supplement, the early warning signals go away, and you're going to add 20 years of your life. It is that simple. If you can make oatmeal cookies from a recipe, you can do it. Now, as Mike said, I didn't always have this tummy. I was an athlete. I was a captain of the wrestling team in high school and college, University of Missouri. Only weighed 127 pounds and only had 3 grams of fat on me at that time. But I read a story that said exercise kills. There's never been a professional athlete ever lived to be 100. Now, I found out that's not true anymore. There was a baseball player that lived to be 100. He lived to be like 100 years, and one day, boom, he fell over dead. But there's never been a football player, there's never been a basketball player, there's never been a hockey player, there's never been a runner, there's never been a swimmer who's lived to be 100. And the reason is, exercise without supplementation is suicide. When you're sweating from exercise or physical labor, you're not just sweating out water, you're sweating out a soup that contains all your essential nutrients. If you're just drinking soft drinks and water, or worse yet, Gatorade, you're not going to do very well. And I'll show you why in a second. The guy who invented the power bars, Brian Maxwell, 51, a multi-millionaire, died at age 51 of a heart attack, won 14 marathons in the World Games and Olympics, very well-known long-distance runner, died of a heart attack. Beautiful young girl, Ronelda Pierce, 19 years old, the pride of Florida State University, girls basketball, 19 years old. She was going to be the WNBA's new superstar. She was going to be the Michael Jordan of basketball for women, and she died at age 19 of a ruptured aneurysm, a copper deficiency. There's never been a Nobel Prize winner lived to be 100. There's never been a professional athlete except a baseball player lived to be 100. Reggie Lewis, captain of the Boston Celtics, had a heart attack, a cardiomyopathy heart attack, a selenium deficiency at age 27. Well, the dream team of cardiology was trying to figure out what to do with him to get him back on the floor. Could they do a heart transplant and still play basketball? He died of a second cardiomyopathy heart attack because nobody gave him 10 cents worth of selenium. But justice has a way of coming around. God is very good about that in His own way, in His own time. A year and a half later, the captain of the dream team of cardiology, one Dr. W. Thomas Nuss, had died of the same thing at age 48. Now, if he was my cardiologist and he died of a heart attack at age 48, Would you keep doing what he's telling you to do? Now, if he said salt was no good, man, I'd take the top off that. If he says that exercise was good for you, I'd just lay there, man. I wouldn't even blink, nothing even looking. This young fella here, Corey Stringer, from the Minnesota Vikings, he was a great offensive lineman, a tackle, and he died at age 27 of heat stroke. Here's a multi-million-dollar athlete dying of a heat stroke. Ignorant people who can't even read, living out in the deserts of Africa, they never die of a heat stroke. It's 120 degrees out there. He has all these team doctors and all the trainers, and he dies of a heat stroke. The reason is, when he collapsed, I'm sure his internal temperature is 105, 106 or more. They called the ambulance. 10 minutes later, they come rolling up, and then they put him in there. They wheel him to the hospital, and he was dead by the time he got there. Well, what they should have done was taken the garden hose that they're filling that Gatorade bucket with and wash that guy down. Take his clothes off, give him an enema with that cold water, get his core temperature down, and he'd have lived. He would have lived. If as soon as he collapsed, if they would have put that cold water all over him and given him a cold water enema right there, he'd have lived. But everybody's so dependent on those doctors that they don't even do the simplest of things to save their buddies. And that's where we have to change that. Amen. Okay. Amen. I like that kid. This gal here, an Olympic legend, Wilma Rudolph, triple gold medalist, died of brain cancer at age 54. That's caused by a deficiency of a trace mineral. If you're just supplementing with that trace mineral, the odds of you getting a brain cancer is almost zero. But if you're sweating and you're just drinking pop of some kind or another, or water, how much of that you're going to get? Zero. Okay, y'all recognize this fella? Walter Payton died at age 45 waiting for a liver transplant. If they had just given him some selenium, he'd still be alive today. But he's waiting for that liver transplant. That's right, he died of a selenium deficiency. A certain type of liver cirrhosis is caused by a selenium deficiency. Do football players sweat? Is there any selenium in Gatorade? No. I want to talk about high blood pressure. How many ever heard that black people get high blood pressure? Yeah, that's right. And we know it's a black gene because doctors tell us so, right? The stealth killer. America's high blood pressure crisis is spinning out of control. Now, dogs and cats and parakeets and horses and cows and pigs and every animal you can think of get high blood pressure. They can get it. They don't get it because in those little pellets we give them, we put the minerals in there so they don't get high blood pressure because we don't have insurance to pay for calcium channel blockers and beta blockers. Whether you believe it or not, how many of you have ever heard that salt has something directly or indirectly to do with high blood pressure? Yeah, if you don't raise your hand, you're asleep already, because I know you heard that. What's the first thing a good farmer puts out for his livestock? Salt block, salt lick. There's nobody out in the pasture telling that cow she's limited to 1 lick a day, is there? I refuse to believe that my human patients are dumber than a cow. A little more than 8 years ago, this came out. It was presented at the annual meeting of the American Heart Association in Portland, Oregon. Doctors lack proof that too much salt is unhealthful. After years of telling healthy people that too much salt isn't good for them, researchers still don't have solid evidence to back up that claim. Same study, just a little more detail. The study found that people who limited their salt intake to 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram a day, which is what doctors want you to do, had 6 times more heart attacks, had 600% more heart attacks than those who defied their doctors and ate double that amount. Remember, September 2000, Scientific American, the people who defied their doctors and did their own thing live longer than the ones who did what the doctor said? Scientific American, February 1999. High blood pressure in African Americans. Finally, they started looking at this seriously, and they went to Nigeria out in the bush where people had never seen a doctor or a stethoscope, took their blood pressure, and 7% of them had high blood pressure, came back to the United States, did a lot of DNA testing. They found a large pool of people whose ancestors had originated in Nigeria and took their blood pressure 33%. They knew immediately it was not genetic, because if it was genetic, it would be 7% and 7% or 33% and 33%. You can't have the same gene pool, just different locations, and have different numbers and it be genetic. It's not going to be genetic. So what's the difference between these two groups of people? Well, these people living out in Nigeria, out in the bush, are still putting their wood ashes, their plant minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the wood, into their gardens. They're still mixing it with their food and cutting their salt with it. The people in Atlanta and Chicago and Miami and L.A., they're living on French fries and Pepsi-Cola, and I guess in Atlanta it'd be Coca-Cola, right? And you're not supplementing because people don't put wood ashes into their food anymore. And I get people tell me, they get kind of cocky. Oh, yeah, well, man, I'm 25 years old. Man, I'm fit. I don't need none of that stuff. We were giving a lecture like this over in an LA Fitness Center in Atlanta 4 or 5 years ago, and about halfway through the lecture, a good-looking gal, I mean, she was a 15. If a 10 is the tops, she was a 15. I mean, she had it all. And she said, "Oh no, Dr. Wallach, it's not the nutrients. It's you need to do aerobics and physical fitness." And she just kind of saunters, "Oh no." And half the people got up and walked out with her. I mean, you knew who had the power in that room. She did. She took everybody out. Because she's a personal trainer. Now the tragedy of that story is about 2 months later I started getting all these calls from Atlanta. "Hey, I need that stuff." And after about the 20th call, I said, "Why am I getting all these calls from Atlanta all at once?" They said, "Well, remember that gal who walked out? You know, she's 32 years old, beautiful personal trainer. She dropped dead on the treadmill this morning." Yeah, went to zero. Okay, January 2005, British Medical Journal, high blood pressure in blacks not genetic, finally. Yes, thank you, Lord. High blood pressure in blacks is not genetic. High blood pressure in whites is not genetic. High blood pressure in humans is not genetic. High blood pressure is not genetic. We can eliminate high blood pressure in the black community in America in 90 days if everybody will do exactly what I tell you. We can eliminate high blood pressure in the black community in 90 days. It's that simple. And it's so simple it's scary. High blood pressure is actually caused by a deficiency of the mineral calcium and the deficiency of its cofactors. Now you can take all the calcium you want, you might get 20% better, but if you want to get 100% better, you take the calcium and all of the cofactors, right? There's 89 cofactors that go along with calcium. You need vitamin C, you need vitamin A, you need boron, you need vitamin D3, you need magnesium and manganese and so on. You need all these nutrients if you want the calcium to work right. And if you do that, usually within a couple of weeks, you're taking your own blood pressure now. In a couple of weeks, you see, blood pressure comes right down in the normal range if you're on medication, or a period of 6 to 8 to 10 weeks, you can wean off your medication. You do not want to cold turkey off your medication, then start taking the nutrition. It takes a couple of days, a couple of weeks for that nutrition to kind of rebuild the body and re-regulate it. But we can eliminate high blood pressure in the black community in America in 90 days if everybody would just do that little system. It's a little nutritional program. How many of you have ever heard, whether you believe it or not, that cholesterol, either directly or indirectly, has something to do with cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease? Sure, everybody knows that because doctors say so. We've known for 50 years that cholesterol has nothing to do with cardiovascular disease or coronary artery disease. Elevated cholesterol and triglycerides do not cause any diseases. They do not cause a single disease. If you can find me any disease that's caused by elevated blood cholesterol or triglyceride, I'll give you $1 million in small bills, tax-free, in any offshore account you want. So I'm very, very confident there's not a single disease that is caused by elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides. So just lowering that with a drug that causes blindness and liver cirrhosis doesn't make sense when you know that, because you're still going to die of cardiovascular disease if that's all you're doing. What that indicates is you might be deficient in niacin or vitamin B3. You might be deficient in chromium, vanadium, 2 trace minerals. We need them for managing our blood sugar. We need it for managing our blood fats. You can be deficient in the omega-3 essential fatty acids. In fact, American Longevity, our company, we sued the FDA so we could put this information on the labels of our essential fatty acid bottles and in our catalogs, because we've known this for 50 years. There's literally millions of studies that have been done on essential fatty acids and how to prevent stroke and heart attacks, and the FDA wouldn't let people put it on the labels of their bottles, their nutrient supplements. So we had to sue them to get it. So we're very, very proud that we did it. Nobody else would join us. They're afraid of them, so we just went after them by ourselves. So if it's not cholesterol and triglycerides that cause coronary artery disease, what is it? What causes coronary artery disease and arteriosclerosis and heart disease? How many of you have ever heard of free radicals? Raise your hand. Good. How many of you have ever heard of trans fatty acids? Raise your hand. Well, trans fatty acids are free radicals that come from things like vegetable oils, margarines. Margarine is perhaps the worst type of fat, not only for the heart but the body. It increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. It increases your risk of coronary artery disease, Alzheimer's disease, macular degeneration, cataracts, cancer. Who told us to give up animal fats that our 98-year-old grandparents used, such as butter and lard and chicken skin and all that kind of stuff? Who told us to give all that up? Medical doctors, right? They told us to give that up and go to margarine. Well, it turns out that margarine is the cause of increased rate of cardiovascular disease and coronary artery disease. I like my patients to eat 6 to 10 eggs a day, not fried, remember, nothing fried, but poached or soft scrambled in butter, low temperatures, soft-boiled, hard-boiled. I was glad to see this come out in March of 1991 because it showed that my 10 eggs are probably pretty conservative. Normal cholesterol in an 88-year-old man who eats 25 eggs a day. And you have to ask, why was this old dude eating 25 eggs a day? Maybe he didn't have any teeth and couldn't eat steaks anymore. Maybe he owned an egg farm and wanted to do his own quality control. But if you appreciate it, 95% of the weight of men's sex hormone, testosterone, is made from a special steroid in the body called cholesterol. You can only make 10% of your daily need, and if you do not take in cholesterol, the odds are you're going to have some problems. You're not going to have enough sex to be able to live longer, right? And so this fella figured out on his own He figured out on his own that the more eggs he ate, the more studly he became. Another fact we've learned is that the lower your cholesterol goes, the more stupid you become. There's somebody with low cholesterol. This came out February 14th, Valentine's Day of this year, and this was a big study, and they looked at almost 800 men, 1,100 women. They divided them into two groups, those with cholesterol below 200, which doctors are going to tell you is good, and those with cholesterol above 240, which doctors are going to say is very bad. And it turns out that the ones who had blood cholesterol above 240 were 80% smarter than ones who had blood cholesterol below 200. Because it turns out that this fatty insulation material of the brain, myelin, is made out of 100% cholesterol. It makes up 75% of our brain weight. 75% of your brain weight is fat, cholesterol. So somebody says, hey, you're a fathead. You say, thank the Lord. Alzheimer's disease, tidal wave is feared. 14 million Americans are going to die of Alzheimer's disease between March 2000 and 2025. 14 million. That's because they're the ones who are following the doctor's instructions and giving up eggs and butter and red meat and chicken skin and salt. The ones who eat those things are still flying airplanes at 100. Getting the picture? Yeah, vitamin E alone can ease memory loss in Alzheimer's patients. This came out a year and a half ago, January 2004. Big study by Johns Hopkins University Department of Public Health out of medical school. Almost 5,000 men and women over the age of 65. People just taking vitamin C and E alone were 78% less likely to have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. You can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease by 78% just by taking 2 vitamins, C and E. What if you'd eat eggs? What if you give up fried foods? What if you took selenium? We can eliminate diabetes in the black community in 90 days if you do what I'm just going to tell you now. Just like high blood pressure. We can eliminate diabetes in the black community in 90 days. This is a very simple nutritional deficiency disease. It's an epidemic disease right now, of course. There's 1 million new cases in the United States alone each year. This article came out in June of 2001. And there's 32 million diabetics in America right now. 31 million of those 32 million, 98%, are adult-onset type 2 diabetes or insulin-resistant diabetes. The reason why it's oftentimes called insulin-resistant diabetes is that the diabetics that have type 2 diabetes make 10 times more insulin than non-diabetics. They make 10 times more insulin as non-diabetics. It's not an insulin problem. It's a deficiency of the minerals and their cofactors that are necessary for the insulin to work. Now, if you have a 1,200 horsepower racing engine and 400 octane racing gasoline, and you put that engine and that gasoline all set up, ready to go inside of a dome that's just filled with nothing but nitrogen, you got the starter outside and you're pushing that starter, it'll crank over. Will it start? No, because it's missing a cofactor, oxygen. Now, you open that little valve and you let the atmosphere in there, you get a little oxygen in there, now you push the button, run, that puppy will run. The same thing is true with your insulin. You're missing those 2 trace minerals and their 23 cofactors. When you have adult onset type 2 diabetes, makes up 98% of the diabetic community. You take a little program, and guess what? You take your blood sugar every morning like you're supposed to. Watch it. Within a week, right into the normal range, and you're able to wean off your medication, go back to normal life. Diabetes is an easy disease to prevent. You don't want to get it before you start worrying about it. You want to prevent it. And so you want to start doing this stuff if you know you have it in your family. It's not genetic, but if your family eats a particular way, everybody tends to eat in that family the same way, right? You have to watch it. And this is an easy disease to prevent. It's a very, very easy disease to get rid of. You supplement properly. Obviously, for 6 months or so, you got to stay away from sugar. Still got to watch that diet. But as that sugar comes down, your blood sugar comes down in the normal range, you're able to wean off your medication because you are empowered to do that when you're diabetic. They teach you when your blood sugar goes up, you need more medication. Blood sugar goes down, you need less medication. They teach you how to do that. So you just follow what you're instructed to do. And your next step will always be self-evident. Historically, adult-onset type 2 diabetes was called adult-onset type 2 diabetes because it only occurred in people over age 50. Well, now babies are being born with it. Primarily minority kids. Little African-American kids and Hispanic kids are being born with diabetes, not because it's genetic, but because there's none of these minerals in soul food. Now, I'm not telling you to give up soul food, but I'm telling you if you want to avoid diabetes, you want to reverse it, you got to supplement. You can eat any way you want except for fried foods. You got to give that up, right? It's an easy thing to deal with. 2 reasons why we have so much diabetes in America today, none of which are genetics. One of which is all the sugar we're taking. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 100 years ago, Americans were eating a half a pound of sugar per person per year. Today, we're eating 157 pounds of sugar per person per year, which is a half a pound a day. So in 100 years, we've gone from a half a pound of sugar a year to a half a pound of sugar a day. You say, well, how do we get a half a pound of sugar a day? Well, there's Krispy Kreme donuts, Dunkin' Donuts, There's Pop-Tarts, Pillsbury Toaster Strudels, Raisin Bran, Fruit Loops, Cocoa Puffs, Captain Crunch, Wheaties, Cheerios, Corn Flakes. In soft drinks, there's 9 heaping teaspoons of sugar per 12-ounce soft drink. If you drink 10 of those, that's 90 teaspoons. Put 90 teaspoons in a bowl, there's your half a pound right there. Plus, you get crazy when you eat that much sugar. You go postal. Well, this was 91,000 nurses over an 8-year study, Harvard Nurses Health Study, very recently. Again, this was June 2004. And they said if they drank one sugar-sweetened soda, like a classic Coke or Pepsi Cola, Mountain Dew, Sprite, 7-Up, whatever, they're 85% more likely to develop type 2 diabetes than those who drank less or maybe none, water or tea, something. But if you drink 2 of them a day, you're going to get it. If you drink 2 sugar-sweetened sodas a day, you're going to get it. What about these teenage kids that drink 2 or 3 of those 42-ounce gulps a day? And you wonder why they're 50 pounds, 100 pounds overweight, and they're going to get diabetes. It's not genetic. It's not a terrible black gene. It's the way they're eating. And we, as the men of the family, we can solve that problem. But they're not going to like water after drinking Pepsi and Coca-Cola for years. And so how do you deal with it? You saw those diabetics get on that Rebound FX. Switch them to that. Tastes good. You got all these big athletes like Shaq using it. You got Theo using it. Evander Holyfield, one of my heroes. He is training for a big match, for a big boxing match coming up mid-September. He's using our products. So this is something you can do. You can switch them off those things that are going to cause diabetes to switch them on things that are good for them that won't cause diabetes. The second thing that causes diabetes in America now is those 2 trace minerals no longer found in optimal amounts in our food. I'll give you one of them. You got to read in the books for the others, because I would tell people about the 2 trace minerals and 23 cofactors and never take the 23 cofactors, and they get 10% better, but it wouldn't work completely because they forgot the 23 cofactors. So I want you to read it in the book Hell's Kitchen, and then you'll figure it out. The first trace mineral I'm going to give you is chromium. Everybody's heard of chromium. It makes your bumper shiny. They went back to 1948. Started getting frozen blood from laboratories. In 1948, there was 1,000 micrograms per liter of parts per billion of chromium in human blood in America. By 71, it dropped to 13. By 72, it dropped to 10. 73, it dropped to 4.7 to 5.1. By 74, it dropped to 0.73 to 1.6. By 78, it was all the way down to 0.16. It's dropping like a rock because nobody's putting the wood ashes, the plant minerals in our food and our gardens anymore like we did 100 years ago. And that's the problem. And so we have to consciously supplement to make up that difference. Okay, the last disease we're going to talk about, we could go over 900 of them. We only got time for one more. Arthritis and osteoporosis. According to the Center for Disease Control right out of Atlanta here, 85% of Americans over the age of 50 already have osteoporosis and arthritis of one type or another, one degree or another. There's not a single medical treatment designed to prevent or fix it. You saw what happened to Bo Jackson, great 2-sport athlete, football and baseball, had a degenerative hip disease. That was just caused by mineral deficiencies. Of course, they tried their big high-tech hip replacements, and now you say, Bo who? Because you never heard of him again after they did that. And I'm sure they convinced him they were going to make him a bionic athlete. Just let us put in 2 hips, and man, you're going to be fine. Well, he just sort of disappeared off the landscape. Now, we learned 300 years ago in the animal industry how to prevent and cure arthritis and osteoporosis in animals. We've known how to do it in animals for 300 years. If you give an animal a commercially prepared diet and don't give them any table scraps to mess up the ratios in that commercially prepared diet, they'll live to be 20, 25 years old today without arthritis and osteoporosis. 60 years ago, some of you old enough like me to remember 60 years ago, an old dog lived to be 10. And you thought he was doing good because usually they live to be 6, 8 years old, right? And then you'd eat them. Now a dog lives to be 20 and they don't get arthritis and osteoporosis because they have all that stuff in the dog food. All we get is painkillers. And so we have to know more. We have to do it ourselves. Because if you're dependent on the medical system to do it for you, you're living in la-la land. We have an epidemic of arthritis because we have all these baby boomers come along who listen to doctors, who think doctors are it. And I really appreciate Pastor Dollar's position because he says, why do you listen to all those guys with those doctors behind their name when you should be listening to the good Lord, right? Amen. Amen. The bad news is research shows that the disease starts attacking your joints long before middle ages. It starts when kids are 3 years old to get arthritis and osteoporosis. How many of you have ever seen a kid with growing pains? You know, you go to a mall, you sit down, just look at the kids. You see this mother who's only 85 pounds carrying a 120-pound kid on her hips. Yeah, and then she's got 3 other kids in one of those 18-wheeler baby carts. They have the big air horn. And that's because she's feeding those kids nothing but apple juice and grape juice. They think they're doing good because I'm not giving my kids pop. Well, how much calcium is in grape juice and apple juice? 0! Plus, you're going to make your kids crazy. and poor in school and they get 3 12-ounce cans of Mott's apple juice a day or 3 12-ounce cans of Welch's grape juice a day. The human being isn't meant to eat that way. Now people say, well, yeah, I don't want to use that nutrition. My doctor's going to give me a FDA-approved drug like Vioxx. $27 billion worth of lawsuits against the producer, Merck, because in the 4 years that it was on the market, Vioxx caused 139,000 heart attacks. Depending on whose data you looked at, 55,000 to 85,000 of those people died from Vioxx, and the FDA never took it off the market. Merck took it off the market because they were getting sued so much they couldn't afford to leave it on the market anymore. The FDA never took it off the market. How many of you ever heard of arthroscopic surgery? Oh, there's a guy who's had a couple of them. Arthroscopic surgery for arthritis of the knee is worthless. It's a worthless procedure. When you have arthritis, do you think you just have arthritis in your left knee which really hurts bad? It's all over your body. And if you go in there and scrape that thing around with arthroscopic surgery, does it fix your systemic arthritis and osteoporosis? No. He's eventually going to do his thing, which is to remove it and put a prosthesis or a plastic or metal one in there. In 90 days, you can rebuild your hips and shoulders and fingers and toes and ankles. You can rebuild them in 90 days, just like Theo did. I just love Theo in his story because he gives hope to everybody. He was told that you're done, your career is over. All the best orthopedic surgeons in the world cannot fix you. And in 90 days, just with some simple little nutritional programs, we built him back together. Now he's one of the top athletes in the NBA, top athletes in the world. But he was smart enough to do it. All other athletes, nah, Bo Jackson, I'm going to get that bionic double hip thing. Yeah, my orthopedic surgeon's the same one that did Elizabeth Taylor's 17 hip operations. Well, if they were so good, why did he have to do the other 16, right? Well, the reason why these doctors continue to do this, even though it's a worthless procedure, and this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine back in July of 2003, is because the 5,000 American doctors who specialize in that procedure, their income for 2001 was $1.5 billion for that one procedure. Are they going to give that up just because it's worthless? No. You have to be tough. When they come to you and say, Roy, you got bone-to-bone arthritis in your knee, and I could go for the big one and give you joint replacement surgery, but we got this new thing called arthroscopic surgery, and I can clean that thing up, and it'll last you an additional 6 months. When you have a failed and corrupt system, you have to stop using them. Osteoporosis strikes both men and women equally. We've known that for 100 years. Osteoporosis only became a postmenopausal woman's problem in 1958 when the pharmaceutical industry invented estrogen. That's a true story. We've known for 100 years that osteoporosis and arthritis occur equally in both men and women. The reason why doctors don't focus on men is because they can talk women into a big lie that estrogen will reduce their risk of osteoporosis, actually reverse osteoporosis, neither statement which is true. But it does get rid of hot flashes, which make them happy. Now, the results turn the tables on the belief that women are the prime victims of the condition. Now, this has been known in modern times since November 2001. They say this information will help professionals deal with unexplained bone fractures in men and the way education about the condition is handled. Now, how many of you gentlemen since November of 2001 have received a phone call, an email, a postcard, or some kind of direct communication from your medical doctor saying, look, we've just learned that osteoporosis occurs equally in both men and women. I expect you to come in here immediately for a bone density test so we can get ahead of this thing. How many of you men have received that communication in any way, shape, or form from your medical doctor? This was published in every medical journal in the land, in the world. If they say they haven't seen it, then I wouldn't go back to them because they're supposed to be reading this stuff, right? I'm 65 years old. I'm telling you, there's nothing wrong with any of my joints. Amen. Thank you, Lord. Nobody's going to steal an airplane with me on it. And so it's just a matter of giving your body the raw materials, and we're built to last at least 120 years according to God, and I believe Him. Amen.